Well, welcome everyone. I'm Sandra Oropeza, and today I'll be presenting a portion of my master's dissertation titled Dictators in Anti-Authoritarian Picturebook, a multimodal analysis. Yes. Also cannot change. Okay, yes. In this study, inspired by Inter, Martin, and Onsworth, I conducted a multimodal analysis of two picture books. The aim was to examine the portrayal of dictatorial leaders and civilians, uncover the underlying ideologies, and explore the political agency attributed to both civilians and child readers. In order to reach this goal, I proposed the following research questions. That's okay. 1. How are fictional dictators portrayed in the selected picture books? 2. What type of political agency is attributed to the citizens in these books? And 3. How do these books address children and citizens? So, in my master's dissertation, I studied 4 books, but in this for this presentation, I'm only going to talk about 2. And the first one is Así es la dictadura. This is the dictatorship in English. This book was published in 1977 by Equipo Plantel and Mike Casal in Spain. This didactic narrative portrays the behavior of a dictator and was released during the post-Franco era, known as La Transición, the transition. It stands as a notable testament to the countercultural resistance against the Pact of Silence. During this time, in order to resolve the conflict after the dictatorship, there was like an agreement, an implicit agreement to be quiet and forget and forgive. So this book was like a rebel in that way because they didn't keep quiet. They published this book about dictatorships, no? And the second one is De Aquí No Pasa Nadie. I selected the Spanish version because it's my language and it's closer to the Portuguese that is the original. This book was published by Minos Martins and Carvalho, and originally authored in Portugal. In this postmodern narrative, a dictator proclaims an interdict. None may traverse from the left page to the right until 2 children challenge this restrictive decree. This allegory echoes the era of Salazar's authoritarian rule in Portugal from 1930 to 1974. So for my analytical framework, I took the multimodal analysis as my theoretical framework, founded on the idea that picture books serve as repositories of diverse forms of communication. These semiotic modes, as elucidated by Kress and Van Leeuwen, offer socioculturally shaped resources for conveying, representing, interpreting, and communicating meanings. This multimodal analysis provides us with a framework to dissect the grammar of images and understand the synergy between the different modes that coalesce in the meaning-making process during the reading of picture books. Furthermore, as articulated by Serafini, a multimodal analysis necessitates examining a text from 3 cardinal perspectives: A, perceptual; B, structural; and C, ideological. Within this context, ideology is, as defined by Stephens, denotes a system of beliefs by which we make sense of the world. For this study, I have chosen to follow Serafini's methodology. Consequently, from the perceptual standpoint, we will scrutinize the choices of color, drawing style, and sizes as signifiers of meaning of each book. We will also explore the symbolic and metaphoric dimensions that underline these texts. Proceeding to the structural perspective, we will examine the interplay of visual elements in relation to one another, elucidating contributions to overarching meaning-making process. Finally, from the ideological perspective, we shall delve into how the historical context has influenced the representation of dictatorial figures, the perspective on the desirable political participation, and the concept of children's citizenship. So first, we're going to explore the dictator. As I said before, Así es la dictadura is a narrative that amalgamates fiction and informative elements from my perspective, because even when it has like a very obvious didactic intention, it also tells the story of how a dictator reached power and then how he is rejected and he loses the power. So it sheds the light in the actions of the dictator and the treatment made out to the populace under his rule. Notably, this dictator remains nameless, so it's just the dictator. It doesn't have a name, this character. The vivid and saturated colors that permeate the book illustrations may initially suggest a playful and vibrant atmosphere. This effect is further reinforced by the minimalistic and exaggerated drawing style employed in depicting the dictator, a technique often utilized for humorous purposes. However, it is essential to note the dissonance between this stylistic choice and the somber subject matter, a dissonance that invites alternative interpretations. For instance, the consistent portrayal of the dictator in a dominant vertical position, as we can see in these images, is always over the citizens. Signifies an inherent power disparity and underscores the extent of control he exercises over the other characters. The text further reinforces this notion as exemplified in the provided excerpt. While the book refrains from explicit depictions of violence, it employs metaphoric expressions as seen in the illustration of the dictator cultivating skeletons. And the text that I was talking about is in the first image, where it says, la dictadura es como un dictado. Un señor dice lo que hay que hacer y los demás obedecen, solo porque sí. Yeah, so dictatorship is like a dictate. Man says what everyone has to do, and everyone just obey just because. The stark contrast between the content and style may be attributed to the historical context of the book's publication. Así es la dictadura, as I said before, emerged in 1977 in Spain, a few years following Francisco Franco's demise, during a period known as La Transición. This era marked Spain's transition to democracy and the collective effort to grapple with the trauma of dictatorial violence while seeking peaceful conflict resolution through a process known as forgiveness. Nevertheless, it is important to note that Así es la dictadura was part of a rebellious trend in Spain that resisted acquiescence to this pact of silencio, pacts of silence. Symbolic attributes within the book facilitate the identification of the dictator as Francisco Franco. In every spread, the dictator sports glasses and a mustache, reminiscent of Franco's later appearance. However, the creators of Así es la dictadura refrain from overtly referencing Franco, possibly as an act of compliance with the prevailing pact of silence, or pacto de silencio. It is crucial to underscore that Así es la dictadura serves as a book inspired by Francoism while maintaining the potential to symbolize totalitarian regimes beyond Franco's Spain. In the Aquí no pasa nadie, the dictator takes the form of a military leader who exerts control over the citizens, imposing an absolute prohibition against crossing to the right side of the book, a realm he reserves from himself. In this narrative, the dictator assumes a secondary role, featuring only briefly within the story's unfolding. His name, General Alcázar, remains consistent in both the Spanish and Portuguese versions and alludes phonetically to the real-life figure of Salazar, the dictator of Portugal. Similar to Así es la dictadura, the Aquí no pasa nadie employs vibrant and saturated colors and employs even more minimalistic drawing style. Nevertheless, in this context, these semiotic choices serve to elicit humor and levity, while the dictator's vertical position, as we can see here, relative to other characters underscores a power disparity, the deliberate exaggeration of his reactions accompanied by the use of typography to depict his perpetually shouted speech creates an atmosphere of incongruity. Yes, and also I think there's an incongruity between him being always in a vertical position and trying to look bigger, while in reality he's very short. And that's also causing this humorous effect, no? Making him look like ridiculous. The explicit and open intent to satirize the dictator and establish clearer links to historical figures can be attributed to the book's postmodern nature. The Aquí no pasa nadie is characterized by elements of parody, self-reflection, and carnivalesque subversion. It incorporates metafictional references within characters that are aware of their existence within the fictional narrative. Like we can see in the last page, he says, ¿y en qué estado me han dejado las páginas? Es impresionante. So he says, in what state they left the pages? So he's aware that they live in a book, no? Furthermore, the book parodies the Salazar regime, which, well, that already said, but it challenges the authority through humor. The open mockery of the actual dictator can also be attributed to the temporal distance from the regime in question. The Aquí no pasa nadie was published in recent years, affording both authors and readers greater freedom to engage in discussion, reflection, and even mockery of past injustice. And now we are going to go to the second research question: how is the authoritarian ideology promoted? For this, I analyzed the political culture that is shown in this picture book as desirable, like what ideas about the type of participation are favorable for democracy in each picture book. Within the pages of Así es la dictadura, citizens are depicted as cognizant of the political process. They appear to support the dictator in public demonstration. Yet, upon closer examination of the facial expression, one discerns expressions of disapproval, anger, and fear. Like we can see in this. And for example, this guy, he's very scared. He's supporting the regime because he has the flag, but his face shows a lot of fear. And he's looking at the soldier. Because the citizens are denied the liberty to voice dissenting and opinions freely. The book underscores the consequences of holding different viewpoints, as we can read. Well, in another slide, I think I didn't include this. It says, los que piensan de otra forma están mal vistos y maltratados, y los que, además de pensarlo, lo dicen, viven bastante peor. A veces hasta tienen que marcharse porque no se pueden defender. So it says, whoever thinks of differently are seen wrong and they are mistreated. And whoever, besides thinking, also says it or express it, live really worse. They even have to leave because they cannot defend themselves. Thus, the narrative metaphorically conveys the suppression of dissent, although it avoids explicit violence. A pivotal shift in the political culture occurs within the book as citizens decide to collectively voice their dissent by saying no, as we can say there, to the dictator and eventually expelling him. This transformation is reflected in the book's visuals, with the citizens assuming a more empowered position related to the dictator, signifying a shift in the power dynamic. Because now they are in a vertical position relating to the dictator. This participatory political culture is portrayed as positive and desirable, aligning with the book's intention of imparting a specific form of political participation to children. And now in De Aquí no pasa nadie. De Aquí no pasa nadie also presents a similar perspective on political participation. Initially, citizens obediently adhere to the dictator's rule, refraining from crossing to the right side of the book, despite protests against its unfairness. However, as time progresses, a growing number of citizens gather near the soldier who enforces this restriction. Notable, this narrative emphasizes the citizens' willingness to respect the law initially. Then, the citizens' relationship with the dictator undergoes a transformation. Initially, the soldier holds a position of authority, depicted in the vertical angle related to the approaching characters, as we can see in the first image. Yet, as the citizens converge upon him, their position shifts to a horizontal angle, like we can see this one, where everyone is in the same kind of in the same place, the same level. Indicating a reduction in the perceived power differential. The narrative further evolves as the citizens' obedience to the law is challenged. When two children inadvertently breach the boundary while playing with the ball, they respectively request permission from the guard. Surprisingly, the guard acquiesces, and this act of disobedience subsequently encourages the entire citizenry to follow suit. In the end, the citizens reclaim their political agency fully. The Aquino Pasa narrative presents not only political participation as desirable, but also champions civil disobedience and the act of challenging authority in the pursuit of justice and democratic values. The book emphasizes both individual and collective opportunities for choice and underscores the power of collective action of effective change. Okay, the last question is about children as citizens. For that, I use these three perspectives. One sees children as apolitical, the second that sees children as pre-political, as citizens in the making, and the third one sees children as political, as where children are already agents to create a political change. The first one is more protectionist because it considers that children should be protected in the private space. And then in the last one, children are allowed to express their political opinions in the public space. Okay, well, I can emphasize. In children's characters in this book are not depicted as political agents because in most of the slides they're only observing what happens. And in this one, for example, it says, se dan cuenta de que la realidad es muy buena para unos pocos, muy injusta para todos y muy cruel para algunos. So it says in this image where the children are, it says, they notice that reality is very good for a few, very unjust for everyone, and very cruel for some. So the children notice, no? But they don't participate, even in the image that we saw before, where they reject the dictator, there are no children present. So they are not seen really as political agents, they're only observers. Hence, this may suggest that children are seen as pre-political because they are supposed to be prepared to be good citizens in the future. And this also aligns with the didactic intentions that are in the book that are explicit in the pretext prepared by the editors. However, children are motivated to express their opinions and discuss their ideas. Thus, they're still seen as agentic. And then in the Aquino Pasa, it's very different because here, the ones that start challenging the unfair rule are the children. In this book, children have a more active role in the change of the political culture. They are not given the responsibility of correcting adult mistakes in the future, but they are listened to in the present to inspire others to fight for freedom. However, they still require the permission of adults, so they are still considered pre-political. In conclusion, both books offer valuable tools for discussing authority, justice, and political participation with children. While children from politically motivated attacks and not asking them to the responsibility for adult mistakes is ideal, there are instances where children cannot be insulated from systematic or direct political violence, even in private spheres. Acknowledging children as part of the community and valuing their ideas and opinions foster a better community for all to inhabit. Thank you.